Hi everyone, just doing some spraying today and some painting and just waiting on some stuff to dry. So I thought it'd be a good time to go through just what my spray setup is for like cabinet work, what I use for cabinet work. So there's sort of three main ways you can go really in terms of spraying. You can go airless, um, you can go kind of conventional HVLP, something where you're kind of blowing with a compressor, or you can go air assisted, which takes elements of both. And generally speaking, I think air assisted is considered the best setup, and probably rightly so. It's the fastest, and you've got very fine atomization, so you can get a very good finish very quickly. Um, what I use, they don't seem as popular as they once were. Like you go back 20 or 30 years, pressure pots were quite a common thing. You just don't seem to see them anymore. I think airless or air assisted airless, sorry, is probably kind of overtaken them. But personally, I really like the pressure pot setup, and I think it works really well for me. And the barrier to entry, the cost of getting into it, is a lot lower. I mean, like probably the cheapest air assisted setup you can get something like the little mini Graco, which I think are probably around 1,500 quid now, something like that. And assuming you've already got a compressor that will run a pressure pot, HVLP pressure pot setup, you can probably get a nice setup for less than £300 really. I mean, this is my most commonly used setup for top coats and clear coats. And this is just a cheap, generic 2 litre Chinese pressure pot. I think like there's tons of different people who sell them, but they're basically all the same. This one was branded as Nilsson, but they're all pretty much the same thing. And it's got about, I don't know, what's that, maybe 3 meters, 10-foot lines on it. Now, the idea is you'd be able to like carry this around with you or hook it on your trousers and take it around with you, but I don't generally do that. I've made a little hole here that it clips into so that I can't, accidentally knock it off. And it just sits there. And 3 meters of lines along the front of a spray booth is generally enough for me to be able to get to everything. And if there was something really big, it's not hard to unclip it and take it over. And then with that, for clear coats and top coats, I'm using this an Estewata gun. They are AZ1 HTE2. I think they don't exist anymore. I think it's the HTE3 now. But this is a pressure-fed Awata gun, 1.3 millimeter needle set on it. And for like cabinet type stuff, like Renner and Sayalak and all those kind of finishes, it will spray them happily unthinned in relatively cool temperatures. If it's really cold, they do thicken a bit much, really. But that's true of anything apart from probably air assist. And it does a really nice job. And the reason I like it, say, one is it's cheap enough that I can just have multiple setups. I've got setups for primer, I've got a few different pressure pots, a few different guns, got a few guns hanging up. It just gives you lots of options to set up different setups and just leave it. And I mean, like, if I set one of these up with clear coat in, it can just be left with it in there. I don't have to strip it down and change colours or anything. And it just, lives set up. It makes it quick to just, you forget one drawer box. You sprayed the whole job, you find one drawer box that you forgot to spray. Makes it super quick to just go in and spray that one drawer box because it's all still set up there. And I have left this for a couple of months before with paint in it, just sealed off. Just turned off. I used some water balloons, like kids' water balloons. And then what I do is when I've taken my airline off, I just put them over the air inlet so that it creates an airtight seal around the air inlet to stop it from drying the paint out inside. And that works really well. It's fine. It doesn't need anything else, and it'll last a long time in there. You maybe just clean the tip of the gun and clean the air cap just before you start spraying. But that is literally about it. Probably give you paint a stir if it's separated. But yeah, I think it's a good setup. I'll show you a little video of just me spraying a drawer front or something. I'll film something in a second. Just so you can see kind of the speed of it compared to like conventional HVLP cup guns or a turbine gun. And it is an awful lot quicker than a gravity cup gun in terms of how fast the material gets out. How fast the material gets onto the substrate. And the film thickness is therefore thicker. And it atomizes just as well. I like it because I get very good fine control. It's great for drawer boxes and stuff because you can really choke back your flow a bit, bring back your air and create a really super fine mist. So when you're doing the inside of boxes where you get that blowback with higher pressure spraying, it's a nice way of getting like quite a soft, gentle mist in there. You're not getting loads of blowback. And the other thing you can do is if you choke down your fan width to quite narrow, you can then really kind of choke back on how much air you're needing to put in. You don't need as much air to atomize as narrow a fan. And so for like doing face frames and stuff, you're not wasting tons and tons of material. You know, if you've got like a face frame which has got a 40mm rail and you're blasting an 8-inch wide fan over it, most of the material's going straight out of the spray booth through the fans. So it's a good way of being less wasteful with materials as well. I also have some bigger ones. I have one which I leave set up with a 2mm needle with a cheap Chinese generic gun. It's not like a brand of any type, like loads of places sell them again, but they're just those generic kind of Chinese spray guns that you see. That's a 10-litre one that I leave filled with water-based primer. Really good for priming, nice and fast. If you've given it a recent clean down, you definitely get a better performance with the thicker coatings. I find if I give my gun a strip down and clean, the thicker coatings definitely atomize a little bit better. I think probably you start to get a little bit of build up around the inside of the housing of the fluid tip. And I think what that does is, as the material's coming through the fluid tip past the needle, rather than coming out dead straight, it skews it to a slight angle. And so you end up with a heavier side of a fan and a lighter side, and the heavier side doesn't atomize fully, so you get a slightly more orange peely finish. But if you're doing it, if you're doing it kind of like with a nice clean gun, you can get the primer laying down like glass, really. You can really get a good, saves a lot of time on denibbage. So yeah, this is the setup. So these are kind of just what I use. I've got some pot guns as well, and I've got, like probably a dozen gravity cup guns and stuff that I've had over the years, which I use for like stains, or if I'm just doing a really small run. I did a kitchen where every cabinet was a different colour, so I just use pot guns for that because it's a lot quicker than having to keep stripping down and changing colours in the pressure pot. But like the nice thing with only having 3 meters of line, it doesn't take any real priming either. I can get like a half-litre sample tin, pour it in there and have absolutely no problem spraying whatsoever. Whereas with an airless, you need a reasonable amount of paint to prime your actual pump and to prime your lines. So maybe the first, 300ml, half-litre, I don't know what that is in freedom units, a pint or something. You're losing that paint just to get your system set up. I mean, you haven't lost the paint as such, but you can't spray a very, very small amount. So it's good for that as well. I can get away easily with spraying 300ml in this. If I've just got 300ml of paint, that's no problem at all. I've made some modifications to some of these pressure pots. The real cheap ones like these they tend to have mild steel pickup tubes. And if you're spraying water-based on oak, you'll get black staining from the tannin stain. So what I've done on them is they're just screwed in on a thread. I've just unscrewed them. I bought some appropriate size plastic tubing, cut a thread on the outside of that with a die, and then just threaded that in. It's just an M thread, I think it's like M10 or M8, something like that. And just threaded that in, so it's got a plastic pickup tube, which just stops you getting any of the issues. I don't know why they put mild steel. They've got aluminium pots and the fittings are all brass or stainless, but for some reason just the pickup tube is a cheap bit of mild steel and it rusts really quick. You just get immediate black staining on your oak with that. So something to be wary of if you're using water-based. Obviously, if you're using solvent stuff, it doesn't really matter. You can spray AC or pre-cat or PU or whatever, and you won't get that same. You need the water there for it to become an issue, really. So yeah, that's the setup. So I'll do a little video. Hopefully it's useful. It's not very long, but if you've got any questions about it at all, more than happy to try and help in the comments if you want to ask anything. But low barrier to entry, relatively inexpensive setup. I think these cheap pressure pots are really hard to beat, really. Okay.